Just waiting on Rockfin. Check Rockfin. Rockfin, are you ready? Okay, you are. Well, let's go ahead and do the damn thing. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. All right. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Quick shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And I want to go ahead and give shout outs to people in the chat. What is going on, everyone? Lots of comments here. What's going on? Saul says yes on the poll. Yes. Guys, just thank you for reminding me, Saul. If you have a chance to do so, please go ahead and answer that poll question that I have in reference to imperialism and the message that has been coming from Breaking Points. We're going to get into that tonight. Go ahead and answer that, and I'll reveal the results of that poll at the end of that story. I'm also going to do a call-in segment tonight about that as well, so definitely call in. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Shout out to John says 100 they do Saul construct. Greetings, Hannah G says almost Sabby time. What's going on, Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says Doobie Doobie Door 2024. Shout out to Gamer says hello. Greetings, Natalie says that's cute, Lawrence. I think so, Lawrence. That is adorable. Shout out to Robert says Jackson Hinkle water crisis is not Jackson Hinkle. We're going to get into that. Shout out to the Quantum Alchemist says, hey, all. What is going on, Mary? Hello, Sabby, and everyone in the chat tonight. Greetings, Angela says, greetings and salutations all. And I am way more worried about the bad actors in our government than I am any other country, full stop. I agree with you there, Angela. Shout out to, whoops, I think I skipped over a name. Dabby Dab says, woot, woot, I made it on time today. How is it going, Sabby fam? Shout out to Corona says, doing well, Dabby. What's going on? Christian says, I'm so happy to finally join live. Love your show, Sabby. Thank you so much, Christian. Really appreciate that. Greetings, Rodrigo. At Sabby Sabs, have you seen Kyle K lately? Peeked in after a while. Bruh has gone full lib. Sounds like he could host The View. No, I don't even watch it. I don't even watch it. I stopped watching that show probably 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half. I don't even watch it, but I've heard. Shout out to Delthea, who's a Sabby member. Hello, all you beautiful people. Love y'all. Greetings, Roman says Ryan and Emily on Breaking Points just goes to show the Hill/Breaking Point split was a fundraising grift. Yikes. I don't know about that, Roman. I mean, I don't know all the details about that. Shout out to Eric, who's a Sabby member, says happy almost Friday to all. Whoopsie. I skipped over a name again. Shout out to Frank, says, hi, GG4L07. How are you? Greetings, Meow, says, yay, finally here for a live stream. boop, boop, boop. Shout out to Yano Mommy Man says, Sabby Sabs, hi. Hello to you as well. Greetings, Ware Pilgrim. I see you're giving shout outs there to Angela, Natalie, and Gamer. What's going on, Seabrass? Love the poll. Sabby, I unsub from Breaking Points and wouldn't consider watching anything until they respond to some of your receipts. All I'm going to say is this. The video that we're going to talk about tonight, just go look at the comment section. Shout out to YepX says, hi all. Greetings T, Torstrict, Sabby, Sabs. Greetings Anthony, who's a Sabby member, says love. Shout out to Jonathan, who's giving Gamer a shout out there. Greetings Terry, says good evening Sabby and chat. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Let's go ahead and get into the stories tonight. Again, we will be doing call-in tonight after this segment. I'll post the link in the chat once we're done with that poll. So, quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Don't want to forget about you guys as well. Shout out to Sabby patrons. If you want to be a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabby, Sabsters, Sabinators, and the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. You guys are the bomb. You guys are the bomb. And I do have to move these names up there as well. I think I ran out of space. I have to figure that out. But thank you guys. Thank you all for your support. Their names are also scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And I already shouted these guys out last stream. So what are we talking about tonight? Let's go ahead and share the thumbnail here. We have a lot to discuss, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, tonight we are discussing Breaking Point's China scare. And there's question marks there right next to Sagar and Marshall. We're going to talk about this. There's something going on here, and I hope people have been paying attention to that. I'm also going to discuss Khanna liberalism. That was an interesting conversation. We're also going to talk about Jackson, Mississippi water crisis. I think more people need to be paying attention to what's happening there. And I'm also going to discuss American University strike. Strike it down. Strike it down. So, I'm a little poofy today. Let's pop on out here. And we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to need to log in here. We're going to get started with this water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm not sure if everyone has been aware of what's happening there. Now, you know that we do have water issues in this country. It is not just Flint, Michigan. There are many other places that have similar issues when it comes to access to water, clean water, drinking water. And Jackson, Mississippi is now one of those places as well. So I want to give a shout out to Case Study QB for clipping this, because we need to find out, why has this happened in Jackson, Mississippi? Why are they without drinking water? Why is the water that they have not clean? This has actually been an issue that has basically been building up to this moment. This could have been resolved. This could have been prevented if the state and the federal government would have taken the proper measures years ago when they knew that this was going to be an issue, instead of choosing to be reactive. So let's go ahead and get into this clip here.
All right, let's bring in Tom Foreman to explain why there is a water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. Shall we, Berman?
I just look like Tom Foreman. We all look alike. Tom Foreman, go for it. Why is there a water crisis there?
Listen, the reason there's a water crisis there is it's been building up for a long, long time. Yeah, all eyes right now are on this emergency pump that's been brought in, on all the efforts to try to get just enough water flowing there. But you got 150,000 people waiting for this in this town. This is the biggest city in the whole state. This is a big issue. What caused it? Damage to pumps in the main water treatment facility earlier this year, flooding of the Pearl River. Those are the proximate causes. Just because it's worth explaining and understanding why that works. You say, how can flooding cause a problem like this? Imagine if you have this water pipe representing all the miles of water pipe in that town. When you have flooding, the water coming in is usually full of more particulate, needs more treating. Well, if your plants aren't working well, that can get into the system. Even if you somehow can get everything working well enough to clean it and get it moving through the system as usual, every single place that it requires that there might be a leak in the line, if you don't have positive pressure to force clean water this direction, out, if it's going to go out anywhere, then what that does is it allows all that flood water to come into the system that's in the ground, all those contaminants. You have to have positive pressure. So a failure here affects the whole system. That's why they were talking about the idea of having to pump out a big tank and refill it, because once it's in the system, very, very hard to get it out.
Okay, let's go back to something he said here about the plants, because this is really the root of the problem. Listen to what he says here.
Yeah, all eyes right now are on this emergency pump that's been brought in, on all the efforts to try to get just enough water flowing there. But you got 150,000 people waiting for this in this town. This is the biggest city in the whole state. This is a big issue. What caused it? Damage to pumps in the main water treatment facility earlier this year, flooding of the Pearl River. Those are the proximate causes. Just because it's worth explaining and understanding why that works. You say, how can flooding cause a problem like this? Imagine if you have this water pipe representing all the miles of water pipe in that town. When you have flooding, the water coming in is usually full of more particulate, needs more treating. Well, if your plants aren't working well.
Well, if your plants aren't working well. So that has been an issue for a long time. That didn't just happen. So they knew that there was a problem with the plants in Jackson, Mississippi. Why did the state step in to fix those plants? Why did they wait until it just build up over time? And now we have the issue that we have now, where people don't have enough water in Jackson, Mississippi. This is something that I've noticed when it comes to our government, the way our government operates in this country. They tend to be reactive instead of proactive. Now, some would say that they're trying to find ways to save money. But looking at the damage that is done now, are they really saving money? It's actually going to cost more to fix what has just happened now with the water crisis. And you still at some point are going to have to go back in and you're going to have to rebuild those plants. Those plants need to be rebuilt, obviously. So they're really not saving any money. They're just buying time. And then eventually until the bubble bursts. And now we have the situation that we have today. Let's go back in.
That can get into the system. Even if you somehow can get everything working well enough to clean it and get it moving through the system as usual, every single place that it requires that there might be a leak in the line, if you don't have positive pressure to force clean water this direction, out, if it's going to go out anywhere, then what that does is it allows all that flood water to come into the system that's in the ground, all those contaminants. You have to have positive pressure. So a failure here affects the whole system. That's why they were talking about the idea of having to pump out a big tank and refill it, because once it's in the system, very, very hard to get it out. Beyond the immediate cause of that flooding and the failed pumps, outdated and neglected infrastructure. This has been going on for years and years.
Outdated and neglected infrastructure. And he goes on to say this has been going on for years. Our country does not have proper infrastructure. The infrastructure in the United States has been falling apart for years. And this is something that, look, local officials here have to be held accountable as well, not just the federal government. This is something that local officials, local politicians, they've just allowed this to happen over time. They've allowed infrastructure to fall apart. They knew that it was failing and didn't do what they needed to do to prevent something like this from happening. Outdated and neglected infrastructure. Staffing issues at the water plant. Limited resources to fix. I'll let him go on.
People there. Everyone acknowledges this is a long-term problem, didn't just show up. They've dealt with smaller versions of it before. Staffing issues at the water plant and limited resources to fix it all. Now, There's a lot of talk about resources out there, federal, state, local, people trying to get money in there to do repairs. After last year, the state gave Jackson $3 million, $20 million in funding from COVID relief package, $75 million bipartisan infrastructure law funding. All of this could help. But look at what the mayor says. It would take $1 billion to fully repair and replace this system. Nobody is fooling themselves about this, John and Brianna. They are saying what is happening there right now was a long, long time in coming, and fixing it could also be a pretty long-term process.
Yeah.
Now, he says it will take over $1 billion to fix the problem, but maybe if they would have taken care of this years ago, maybe it wouldn't have cost $1 billion. This is what happens when you let infrastructure you neglect it over time. Same thing, not just with these water plants as well, but also this happens with bridges as well. There are bridges here in Boston that are really old that I've been saying for a while. They need to do something about these bridges. There's potholes on the bridge. How you get a pothole on the bridge? So instead of fixing the problem, it's almost like they wait until something goes wrong. And then they say, okay, let's get the money from the state and try to fix it. See, now they don't really have an option. Now the state is like, well, we have to do something about it now, but this could have been prevented. And this is something I've been trying to tell people before when the crisis happened in Flint, that it was not just Flint. There are other towns and other cities in the United States that have water issues. And I'm going to show you something after this clip about the demographics of Jackson, Mississippi, that I feel plays a huge part in why this was neglected. So let's go back in.
Yeah, look, they may get past this immediate crisis. They may have water they can drink sometime soon, but that doesn't fix the problem long term, Tom.
No,
That's
no.
right.
I mean, well, think about how many miles of pipe go under. This is a moderate-sized city. If you get under a huge city, it's a normal, not a huge amount beyond that. And bear in mind, the American Society of Civil Engineers has been saying for a long time, that the drinking water infrastructure in this country everywhere is under tremendous pressure. It is not being maintained the way that they think it should be maintained.
That's a warning sign. I told you guys about this when Congress was going through that infrastructure bill, when they were talking about the Infrastructure Act. And I actually went through that and I showed you guys what they were asking for and what the American Society of Civil Engineers are telling us that we need to have. What Congress was asking for wasn't even half of what the American Society of Civil Engineers were saying that we needed to have just to maintain the infrastructure, not even to fix it, just to maintain it. So he brought up the American Society of Civil Engineers, and I'm glad he brought that up on CNN. More people need to look at that website. There's a lot of information on there. They grade our infrastructure system in the United States, and it's not a good rating. As FYI, last time I checked, I think it was a D. So these are things that should have been taken care of. He says here in this chart, made up of 2.2 million miles of underground pipes. The system is aging and underfunded. Water main breaks every 2 minutes. Estimated 6 billion gallons of treated water lost each day. Enough to fill 9,000 plus swimming pools. This is absolutely horrific. All of this water being wasted every day. Every day.
It's going to take a lot more to take that aging system up to a modern system all over the place. Look at a water main break every 2 minutes in this country. So what we're looking at in Jackson may be unique to the problems of Jackson, but many, many cities around the country have to be looking at that saying, is that our future if we don't find a way to deal with the problems all over the place, where too often it's easy to neglect the work that needs to be done right now because it's not glamorous, it's expensive, it's difficult.
He says it's not glamorous, it's expensive, it's difficult. A lot of things are expensive, but they find ways to pay for those things. I think that if this would have happened, first of all, I don't think it would happen in a wealthier neighborhood, wealthier zip code. But let's say it did. I think the state would have found ways to pay for it. Same thing with Flint. So I don't like the it's too expensive excuse, because other things that they consider to be more important and other communities that they consider to be more important, all of a sudden the expensive issue isn't a problem.
But then pay a price for it later.
Tom Foreman, thank you very much for explaining the situation.
So we need to talk about this, because one question that I have, if the system is old and aging, obviously that system needs to be replaced. If you've had those pipes for as long as you have had them, and it seems like they've been there for a long time, then 9 times out of 10, the drinking water, which is being pumped through those pipes, is not safe. So here we go again in this country. Here we go again. First Flint, now Jackson, Mississippi. But both of those cities actually have something in common. Let's look at the demographics of Jackson, Mississippi. Let's get into that. Oh, we're doing it tonight. We're going there. Now, this is according to the United States Census Bureau. Jackson, Mississippi. Let's scroll down and take a look at the peeps. Here we go. Population as of July 1st, 2021. They probably haven't done the census for this year yet. Whoopsies. That's way too big. Okay. 149,761 people. Age and sex. The majority of the population, 54% women. People 65 and older is 13%. People under 18, 24.5%. And people under 5 years old, 7.1%. Here's the kicker. Race and Hispanic origin. In Jackson, Mississippi, 16.2% of the population are white. 82.5% of the population in Jackson, Mississippi is Black and African American alone. 82%. One more group, another one I want to show you right here. Hispanic or Latino, 1.3%. White alone, not Hispanic or Latino percent, 15.4%. Asian percent, 0.3%. American Indian, Alaska Native alone, 0.1%. And Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, 0.0%. 2 or more races, 0.7%. But the number that I want you to pay attention to is right here, that 82.5% of the population in Jackson, Mississippi is Black or African American. Ladies and gentlemen, similar to Flint, where the majority of the residents are African American, let's go to income. I'm going to circle back. Let's go to income because we're going to connect it all. Let's go down here. Economy, transportation, income, and poverty. The median household income. Now, this was 2016 to 2020, $40,064. Or excuse me, $40,064. Okay. Per capita income in the past 12 months, 22,815. Persons in poverty, 24.5%. Now, let's look at the income again. Median household income, a little over $40,000. The majority of people that live in Jackson, Mississippi, racially, 82.5% are African American. Do you see a connection? This is obviously a city that is not a wealthy city. Looking at that income, and we can look at the jobs as well. Looking at that income, probably working class. Poverty is 24.5. There's poor neighborhoods as well. But the majority of the people living in Jackson are also African American. I believe the reason why the city chose not to fix that problem many years ago when they should have is because of the people that represent the community. These are not wealthy people. I'm telling you, money can buy a lot. These are not wealthy people. 24.5% poverty rate. And the majority of the residents are African American. They don't care about those groups. Do you see what I mean? They're willing to allow poor people, working class people, black working class, poor people. They are willing to allow them to struggle, to suffer. There's no urgency in trying to fix those communities. There's no urgency in trying to fix the plants in a community that is predominantly black, in a community where the median income is a little over $40,000 a year. There's no sense of urgency. But I can tell you, and let's get into it. Would this have happened in Beverly Hills? Would this have happened in Potomac Mills, Maryland? No. These things happen in poor, working class, usually predominantly African American communities, because they are not seen as important. I'm sorry, but we have to say it. It is what it is. Because if there had been an issue with the water in Beverly Hills, they would have fixed it immediately. They have to, because they have to protect wealth. Because when you protect wealth, you protect capital. You see what I mean? There's no profit in them helping poor people. There's no profit in them helping working class people. There's none. There's nothing in it for the city. There's nothing in it for the state. So they purposely allowed for those plants, knowing that they were already fragile, they purposely allowed them to fall apart. We all got to call it out. And it's not just Jackson, Mississippi. It's not just Flint, Michigan. It can also be a Baltimore, Maryland. Let's be real. When did people really start caring about, let's try to fix these communities and make communities nicer in Washington, D.C. before it was gentrified? No, they started caring about that after it was gentrified. When it was like 80% African American, they did not care. We have to know that when I tell you, when it comes to issues, when it comes to the climate issues, when it comes to the water issues, and everybody needed to pay attention to this because I told you last year about the water issue. They don't care if we die. They don't care if poor people get sick and die. They see poor people as disposable, by the way. Most of the time, and by they, I mean our government, most of the time when they look at poor people, they kind of blame poor people for their own state of affairs. They think that it's their fault that they're poor. They don't care about the poor people. So if poor people die in Jackson, Mississippi, they don't care. If black people die in Jackson, Mississippi, they don't care. They are going to protect what brings them money, what brings them revenue. They're going to protect wealth and capital at all costs. Go into the wealthier neighborhoods and you would not see this. You do not see this here in Lexington, Massachusetts, in Concord, Massachusetts. You don't see it. You have to go out to the poor neighborhoods, the poor rural areas of Massachusetts. You have to go out there to see that. They neglect the people. They let it fall apart. They don't care. And you can connect this to the housing issue as well. Because when you see the city allow for public housing communities to fall apart, the building is falling apart, the ceiling is separating from the wall, which I've seen in person. They're not trying to fix it. They don't care if your building falls apart. In fact, they probably want it to fall apart so you can be forced to move out of the building and they can tear it down and build a luxury condo. That's how it works. All about money. Never forget that. I'm going to go to some of the comments here in the chat. Saul says Mississippi capital Jackson is in a state of emergency as the city water's production facilities have been overwhelmed. It's crazy. Kill your egregories. I don't know what that means, but I've been preaching of the sacredness of water for 30 years now. Chris says, I'm sure this would never happen in a nicer upper class neighborhood. No, they don't have these issues. They don't have it. The Hall report says infrastructure isn't a national level issue. It's totally a local government issue. Here you go. Chris says they just gave Ukraine $54 billion. Exactly, right? Is the federal government trying to help people in Jackson, Mississippi? Now, see, this is where the federal government could step in. If the state says we don't have the funds, this is where the federal government could step in and say, we need to send emergency relief to people in Jackson, Mississippi immediately. And we need to send money so that they can build the new water plants because the ones they have now, they got to go. We need to do that. Won't do that for the American people, but you can send the money to people in Ukraine who we've never even met. Meow says pretty much all native reservations have unclean water. That's sad, Meow. Johnny says, Sabby, did you see Mississippi officials are under investigation for stealing $80 million in Fed welfare funds? I did not, but there you go. What? Chris, thank you for the super chat. We on the actual left need to organize and put our petty differences aside if we are going to at least attempt to take our country back. There's more of us than them. That's what the elites fear most. I agree, Chris. They really do fear that. Pete says we have water mains from the 1800s here in Philly. A lot of them are old here in Boston too. Like, the infrastructure in this country is terrible. And thank you for the super sticker, JM. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's crazy, right? It's crazy. And I think there was something else. Did I see? Oh, yeah, they did have veterans there too. It's just, oh man, it's sad. It's really sad. Oh, one more thing I do want to show you about this on this census. I forgot to point out. Look at education. High school graduate or higher persons 25 and up, 86.8%. Bachelor's degree or higher percent of persons age 25 years and up, 28.4%. So like I said, the majority of the people in Jackson and Mississippi, the majority is not like people with professional, college degrees. The majority of them looks like probably got a job, started working right after high school. Again, they don't care about those people. They don't care. If they don't see that you're profitable for them, they don't care. And you can add the police to that too, because police protect wealth and capital. They don't really protect people in poor neighborhoods. So that is that. Now we're going to go on to the next story. And this is a good news story. It doesn't start out as good news, but we get there. So get pumped for that. I'm not sure if everyone has been paying attention to this. Now, obviously, I'm excited about this story. It's about higher education. So I was like, I have to talk about this. I have to cover this, obviously. But I don't know if you guys were aware. Let me put this like that. But employees at American University, not the faculty, the staff, just want to make that clear. Administrators, counselors, like what I was, an advisor, they have decided to go on strike. Now, for those who are not aware, American University, it's in DC, pretty expensive school to go to. It's not like a Harvard where you're like $50,000 a year, but it's still pretty expensive. And right in DC. Now, I have this video here that I want to show you first about the strike and why they are on strike. And I have some good news about this as well. But the reason why I want you to see this video is because they're actually interviewing here and they're going to ask them what their salaries are. And I want you guys to hear this because I think sometimes that people assume that those of us that have master's degrees and are working in higher ed, that we are you were doing well financially, right? And I've told you guys before, that's not necessarily the case unless you're like a dean, right? President of the university. The staff, we don't make that much. You'd be surprised. So this video is it's by Salary Transparent Street. So it's a channel here on YouTube, and it says Union Strike at American University, Washington, D.C. Listen to what they say in reference to their salaries. And I'm going to chime in here and there.
This is Hannah Williams from Salary Transparent Street. We're at American University in Washington, D.C. Union workers here have been protesting since Monday for fair wages. Let's go talk to them.
I'm a circulation services specialist at the university library here.
How much do you make?
I make about $40K.
How long have you been working here?
A little over a year. I actually got my bachelor's here and my master's of science here.
Are you protesting today?
We're protesting here for better wages and better benefits for all of our staffers here. A lot of people here make under $40K still. People have to pay a lot of money for health care. We're asking for better health care benefits. Many people are just asking to be able to afford to live here in the city. A lot of people have to commute over 90 minutes away just to, make ends meet. And people here just want to not have to choose between paying rent or buying their groceries.
I'm an AUX instructor and a first-year advisor.
How much do you make?
I make $55,000 a year.
How long have you been doing it?
This is my first year at American University, but I've worked at other universities in the past. I have a master's in English TESOL, and then I have essentially ABD in linguistics from Georgetown.
Any student loan debt?
I have $170,000 of student loan debt.
Why are you protesting today?
Partially for myself, a lot for my students. If we don't make good money and we can't be there for them if we're not able to live in this area, and also for my colleagues who make less than 40 grand a year in DC. This unit, there are lots of people who just don't make enough money to live nearby, and if you can't live where you work, this school costs 50 grand a year. You can't even pay them that? Come on.
What are you asking from American?
To increase the amount of money that they're paying people, the equivalent of what they would pay a new hire. We're asking to raise the healthcare cliff from 40 to 50,000 and to come back to the negotiating table in good faith. Tell everyone to sign the form and to force them to actually come back to the negotiating table in good faith.
Okay. So many things to add in there. I'm going to chime in as well.
This is Hannah Williams from Salary Transparent Street. We're at American University in Washington, D.C. Union workers here have been protesting since Monday for fair wages. Let's go talk to them.
I'm a circulation services specialist at the university library here.
How much do you make?
I make about $40K.
How long?
$40,000 a year. So I was wrong. I see American University's tuition has increased. So he said it costs like $50,000 to go there now. $40,000 a year for her salary. And she works at a school that costs about $50,000 a year. This is the reality for a lot of people who are staff members in higher education. I can tell you this firsthand experience. when I worked at MIT, I knew people being paid $10 an hour. MIT, which has one of the largest endowments in Massachusetts, they were actually paying some people $10 an hour with a degree. Now, someone explain this to me, especially if you're in the chat and you live in the DC area. Let me know. Give me a whoop whoop. Last time I checked, housing and rent is pretty expensive in DC. If you're making $40,000 a year, how are you going to afford to live in DC? Unless you have multiple roommates. Same with Boston. Most people have roommates. How are you going to live off of that in DC? Somebody tell me. Huh? But you have some of these faculty members making six figures. And that's just for the teaching portion. That doesn't include the research. That doesn't include all the speaking engagements that they have that they also get paid for. You see how it's not fair? Let's go back in.
Have you been working here?
A little over a year. I actually got my bachelor's here and my master's of science here.
Are you
She has a master's degree and they're paying her $40,000 a year. I can't make this up. This is something I was trying to tell people who didn't work in higher ed. I was trying to tell them, you'd be surprised at what they're actually paying the staff members. Master's degree, $40K.
protesting today?
We're protesting here for better wages and better benefits for all of our staffers here. A lot of people here make under 40K still. People have to pay a lot of money for health care. We're asking.
A lot of people make under 40K at American University. This isn't like some low-ranked school. You see the problem? When I worked at Boston University, I knew people making $30-something thousand a year at BU. What?
For better health care benefits. Many people are just asking to be able to afford to live here in the city. A lot of people have to commute over 90 minutes away just to, make ends meet. And people here just want to not have to choose between paying rent or buying their groceries.
And this is a common story. People want to be able to choose between, or not have to choose between paying their rent and paying for their groceries. And she's right. I've had friends that have worked in DC. They couldn't afford to live in DC. So some of them lived in Maryland, some of them lived in Virginia, and then you have to deal with the traffic on the Beltway. And it's not a fun commute. But they have to live further out because they can't afford to live in the city. This gentleman here, he's a AUX, aux instructor, and a first-year advisor. That position most likely requires a master's degree. Just telling you from experience in higher ed. Listen to him.
UX instructor and a first-year advisor.
How much do you make?
I make $55,000 a year.
$55,000 a year. And this is what people don't understand when they tell us that we shouldn't have gone to grad school to get more student loan debt. Look, I totally get it. But what you have to understand, for some of these professions, if you want to move up, you have to go back to school. You have to get a master's degree. Higher ed is one of those fields. If you want to move up, you have to have a master's degree for a lot of those positions. Otherwise, you'll stay at that entry-level role.
How long have you been doing it?
This is my first year at American University, but I've worked at other universities in the past. I have a master's in English TESOL, and then I have essentially ABD in linguistics from Georgetown.
Any student loan?
Look at all the credentials. He has a master's in linguistics. Linguistics is not easy. I took a linguistics class in undergrad. I was like, the fuck is this? Like, seriously. But all of the credentials he has, $55,000.
Debt.
I have $170,000 of student loan debt.
Why?
Okay, this is my point. $170,000 in student loan debt. He's being paid $55,000 a year. This is why that $10,000 to $20,000, this is what I was trying to tell you guys. that don't really, it'll help him a little bit. But over $170,000 in student loan debt, and his salary is $55,000 a year. And I have seen this over the years with my former students. I noticed the same thing was happening. I mean, it happened to me too. I don't have 170,000, but it happened to me too, where the salary that you're being offered is not high enough for having a master's degree. But they can get away with it because they know that you need to have the master's to get the job. That's how this works. I don't know if this guy is going to be able to pay off $170,000 of student loans, not with that salary. And this was happening to my former students. They were graduating. I worked with the career coach, so I saw the job placements. I saw where they got jobs. We kept track of all that stuff for data purposes. So I saw where they got jobs and I saw the salary offers, and that it blew my mind. These kids are graduating from Boston University, and this is what you're offering them for salary. And these kids got $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 of student loan debt. There's no way. And you want them to live in Boston? The bubble is bursting, ladies and gentlemen.
Why are you protesting today?
Partially for myself, a lot for my students. If we don't make good money and we can't be there for them if we're not able to live in this area, and also for my colleagues who make less than 40 grand a year in DC. This unit, there are lots of people who just don't make enough money to live nearby. And if you can't live where you work, this school costs 50 grand a year. You can't even pay them that. Come on.
What are you asking from American?
To increase the amount of money that they're paying people, the equivalent of what they would pay a new hire. We're asking to raise the healthcare cliff from
Oh, look at that. Healthcare is involved.
40 to 50,000, and to come back to the negotiating table in good faith. Tell everyone to sign the form and to force them to actually come back to the negotiating table in good faith.
You guys have me cracking up in the comments section. I'm looking at some of these comments. You guys are like, what the hell? This is the reality for a lot of people in this country. What you just saw. So that's why they're on strike, and I don't blame them. And if you're watching this and you work at a higher ed institution and you feel like you were underpaid, and there's probably a good amount of you that are, and you feel like you're not getting the benefits that you should get, here's my advice to you. I'm not in higher ed anymore. I left in January. I said, fuck this. My advice to you is to organize with the other employees, your staff members that you have, and try to start some type of union or strike. If you can. I know sometimes financially not everyone can, but that's my advice to you, because these universities, they're never going to change on their own. They're not going to do good things for the staff members just because they think you deserve it. BU didn't start giving us some kind of leeway with working from home until they couldn't stop people from quitting because the turnover was so damn bad. You know that? For the president of the university to have a town hall because the turnover was that bad. They had to give people something to get them to stay. That's how bad it was. Now, here's the problem. After that, I felt like people gave in too quickly. Should have asked for more. That was my take on it. Now, that being said, I do have good news about the staff members that went on strike at American University. And this is from NPR. American University and its staffers reach an agreement over pay and benefits. Shout out to the people. Staffers at American University in DC have reached a settlement agreement after they went on strike this week over complaints of unfair working conditions and low wages. The deal increases pay and benefits for staff members of the university's provost office, according to the Service Employees International Union Local 500. The week-long strike was authorized after 2 years of bargaining failed to bring a contract that provided employees with better wages and equal pay. So I don't think the staff members were being irrational. They've been asking for better benefits for 2 years. They reached their breaking point. Let's go on. And this is from the AU Staff Union. After 468 days at the bargaining table, we've made history because we have a contract. Everyone who is watching this, if you work in higher ed, definitely pay attention to this. You can win. If you get enough people together, you organize, you can win. We have a contract. Thank you to our supporters, colleagues, faculty, comrades, and especially our students. We couldn't have done this without you. Agreement reached, strike ended, we shut it down. Always remember, ladies and gentlemen, always remember that these schools, they don't operate without you. They can have all the faculty members that they want, but especially for those of you that work in these administrative roles like I did, the university does not function without administrative assistants. It doesn't function without the academic advisors. It doesn't function without the people in the admin roles. It doesn't. You have to have them. They are the backbone of the university. So just remember that. Let's go on here. So I'm very happy for them. I'm super excited. This is some good news. You know, every now and then, like, we need to hear some good news. And it says currently there are 550 staff members at the university, ranging from administrative staff, counselors, advisors, technicians, and coordinators who are represented by the SEIU 500. More than 91% of Americans' university staff voted in favor of the week-long strike. This is awesome. And here's some of the benefits they get. An SEIU spokesperson says the agreement provides full-time workers with raises between 7.5% and 13.5%. Guys, at BU and MIT, the most I think I ever got was maybe 2.8%. And MIT, when I worked there, they had a flat raise. Everybody got the same. It was that flat 2%. They were being cheap. At one point, they used to do a cost of living wage. They got rid of that. So 7.5% and 13% over 2 years, and lowest paid workers will receive upgrades and additional increases. Now, I got to say this as well. That goes to show you they could have done that all along, but they won't do it unless you put pressure on them to do so. So shout out, big hoop shout out to the AU strikers. You did the damn thing. And I'm going to show you something in reference to this as well. They brought up the issue of renting, and I want to show you a quick vid really quick. Rent is steadily increasing in the United States. So for the young woman making $40,000 a year in DC, what is she supposed to do if her salary is not increasing to adjust for the high cost of rent? And it turns out it's not just happening in cities like DC and Boston. It has also now made its way down south. Oh, yes. Let's listen to it.
Tonight, skyrocketing rents, forcing a growing number of Americans to think twice about where home is.
Definitely feeling priced out of Boston in general.
It was 3.5 thousand, which is now 6.8.
From coast to coast, rents are rising at the fastest pace in decades. A real estate research firm reporting a record 11.3% increase nationwide. The biggest
11.3% increase. By the way, this video came out this year. But the economy's doing great, right? Isn't that what they're telling us? Right? We have all these job vacancies.
Spikes hitting the South, where many moved post-pandemic, enticed by remote work and warmer weather. Florida, home to the top 3 cities where rents have risen the most. Naples on the Gulf Coast, averaging a 39% spike during the pandemic. Just a few hours south, Evan Ross faced a brutal wake-up call when his Miami Beach landlord told him rent was nearly doubling.
That should be illegal. That should be freaking illegal. How do you double rent during a pandemic? Again, a lot of these cities have no such thing as rent stabilization. They have done away with rent control. What do? There's no accountability.
Either pay $6,500 a month and pay it every month, or if I paid the entire year up front, I could write one check for $72,000, which would be equivalent to $6,000 a month, and they would accept that.
He and his wife wanted to buy a home, but with home values and interest rates pricing them out, they're now trying to rent elsewhere.
So no matter where you're looking, though, you are anticipating a pretty hefty rise.
There is no question we will be paying more in rent than we ever have before. It's just a question of where we'll go and what we'll sacrifice.
Oh, but just give people $10,000 to $20,000 cancellation of their student debt. That'll be great. Where is this $10,000 and $20,000 home that we're supposed to buy? In my state, that's not even enough for a down payment. This is how people become forever renters.
In Texas, the fight to find affordable options getting tougher too. Dallas rent spiking 21% over the last year, according to Realtor.com.
We have so many people moving to Dallas and we don't have enough apartments.
Realtor Story Farrell recommends renters work with an apartment locator to find the best deal or consider staying put. For even with a rise in rent, it's likely cheaper than finding a new property with the same amenities.
I can't tell you how many times just this month of April that I've had a client, okay, I'm going to apply for it. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. They go home that evening and it's gone. And
even Dallas, guys, even Texas, nowhere safe. Nowhere safe anymore.
And nothing else that they're looking for is available.
With experts forecasting rising prices through this year, keeping home where the heart is could cost you. Morgan Chesky, NBC News, Dallas.
It's where the heart is, all right. So you guys see the problem? Canceling $10,000, $20,000 in student loan debt, that's a drop in the bucket when you compare it to the larger economic issue that we have in this country. Used to be you move south because of lower cost of living, right? Even down south, even they're dealing with it now. Where do you go? Interesting, huh? I'm going to go to some of the comments here and I'll pick up the comment on Rockfin and we'll get to the next story. Aspen Fallen says Anime Sabby would find this video super relatable. Oh, yeah. Yeah, guys, there was an Anime Sabby on here a couple nights ago. That was pretty fun. Kristen said, will you be doing a clip of this? Would love to share this around. Yes, we can clip this segment. Eric usually clips like one or two from the live stream. So yeah, this is definitely one that should be clipped. Rodrigo, whenever my employer says we are family, my inner voice is Sabby. Oh, that's sweet. That's sweet, Rodrigo. Miss, they're doing it to price them out of their homes that are more inland because they know with sea levels rising, all that coastline that they all have, their beachfront property on is going to be under. That's a good point, Miss. I didn't think about that. I think I missed someone up here. Robert says, spend $100,000 on a degree and make $30,000 a year. What a wondrous system we have. Yeah, it's the reality for a lot of us. Aspen Fallen, OMG, I made more than that with a 2-year degree. And this is another one. So I have a friend who's a dental hygienist. She went to school for 2 years, community college, became a dental hygienist. Her starting salary was more than what I was making with the master's degree. If only I liked teeth, if only. Zach, hey, but Sabby, Biden forgave 10K, SMH. I know, right? Let's go to those comments on Rockfin, Eric, and then we'll go into the Ro Khanna story. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. Look like a job for Mark Moses. Also, presidents have to stop trusting governors, mayors, county execs with federal money. That money never gets to the intended targeted. Instead, it goes to pay off political favors, fill deficit holes, etc. In this case, to be spiteful, sent the dough back to the federal government. So the federal government did step in, Sabby, but money never got to Jackson. This goes back to FDR every time. 100%, Roger Meadows. That is a good point that you bring up there. When they trust the federal government, they have a lot of trust that the state, the local politicians here will do what they're supposed to do with that money. And sometimes that money never even reaches the hands that it's supposed to reach. Thank you for this tip as well. Fed law needed that says when it comes to federal money being distributed to the states and municipalities, make federal government the sole deliverer of distribution, 100% in charge of the delivery process itself. You're right. You're right. That should happen. I already wrote the law for them, Sabby. Here it is. It shall be the federal government's sole jurisdiction to make sure that federal money and resources gets allocated to its intended target. Federal civil servants will be tasked with going into communities that were targeted for resources and financial relief, sourced from whatever bill was passed into law to send help to that community. They will be tasked with specifically delivering those resources to those communities and also doing follow-ups for those communities to make sure they're getting what they need. No in-betweeners or relegated. I think you meant regulated or relegated to any other entity or government. Thank you for this as well. Also, don't be surprised if private equity behind the scenes is paying the governor off to do what Governor Snyder did in Michigan to regentrify Jackson. Also, this also perfect for National Infrastructure Bank, which would bring in $100 trillion, and a Jackson Public Bank. That's a good point as well. And thank you for this tip as well. Giving in too quickly before coming back was exactly what I was saying regarding New York City and the rents going down during the pandemic lockdown. These fools came back when it got down to $2,200 for rent. People were being told if you don't jump on it now, you might lose, when everyone could have held out until it was $1,000. That's right. That's right, Roger. And thanks for this tip as well. Remove the profit initiative for landlords to raise rents so that they can sell to private equity for condos. By passing ballot initiatives and somehow get state government and ultimately federal government to outlaw private equity from owning not only homes and residential apartments, but apply that also to hospitals, medical facilities, clinics, and all of that. Thank you so much for that, Roger. Well said. Let's get into this story here about Ro Khanna. So this one actually came from the Mehdi Hassan show. I usually case study clips these, but this one came from Mehdi himself. And they're talking about the issues and the problems with neoliberalism. So let's go ahead and get into this. This is an interesting discussion. I'm going to chime in from here and there.
So what's the reaction been from voters? We read in that Politico piece that some Republican voters have been receptive, but have you seen a lot of skepticism still, distrust still of your party, of you?
Sure, but I'd say two things. One, there was someone who said, I can't believe this Khanna guy's talking about make it in America. I thought that was a Trump thing. Actually, it was an FDR thing. It was FDR who helped build the productive capacity of America. But here's why there's skepticism, and there's understandable skepticism. If for over 40 years you've had neoliberalism, which has said, let's just offshore production, if the working class and middle class have lost 25% of wealth since 1980, and you have President Biden come and you start building an industrial base and focused on the working class, and it's been a year and a half, that's not going to suddenly convince people, okay, the light bulb has gone off, our lives are going to improve. So to overcome 40 years of unchecked globalization is going to take some time, but we've got to tell people we're working hard at it.
Let's break this apart, okay? Let's do that.
So what's the reaction been from voters? We read in that Politico piece that some Republican voters have been receptive, but have you seen a lot of skepticism still, distrust still of your party, of you?
All right. Look at the headline here at the bottom. It says Representative Ro Khanna tours Midwest to reconnect white working class voters with the Democratic Party. Now, for those of you who have not seen that interview, I interviewed Khanna, I think this was last month. And one of the issues that I brought up to him was how the working class and poor have been abandoned by the Democratic Party. Hell, they've been abandoned by everybody at this point. Let's just be real. And if you notice, there is something that they tend to do, which they have also done here. It's white working class. You never hear them mention anything about poor people. You see what I mean? This is why I keep telling you, they don't mention them because they don't care about poor people. They consider them to be disposable. They don't care about the people in the ghettos. They don't care about the people living in the trailer park communities. They don't mention them. You see this? You see the problem? But one of the things that I mentioned to him also about the working class is I was like, people are struggling financially, and they have been struggling before this pandemic. Now, that made things worse for some people. Before inflation, before all this happened, people have been struggling, working class and poor people. And the Democratic Party, which claims to be for the working class, really sold working class people out in order to embrace Wall Street and elite academic populations. We saw this with Obama. We saw this with Hillary Clinton. The last president that actually increased the minimum wage was Bill Clinton. How many years ago with that? How many years? Did you guys see that? How are we still at $7.25 an hour, right? Now, I mentioned that, but I mentioned Bill Clinton for a reason. Because at the same time, Bill Clinton still sold out working class people. You had NAFTA. And Joe Biden was still somewhat a part of that too, going into the Obama administration. So now I feel like they finally realize we have to get that base back in order to win. Do you see this? But let's not come in here and like what Khanna is doing. Let's not come in here, Khanna, and pretend like Joe Biden is now being some savior and he's turning everything around for people. Let's stop pretending like Joe Biden is FDR. Joe Biden is not FDR. Joe Biden wanted to cut Social Security. He's on video saying this. Joe Biden wanted to cut Medicare. He's on video saying it. So let's stop pretending like he's some FDR of 2022. He's not. Let's go back and let's go back in.
Sure, but I'd say two things. One, there was someone who said, I can't believe this Khanna guy's talking about make it in America. I thought that was a Trump thing. Actually, it was an FDR thing. It was FDR who helped build the productive capacity of America. But here's why there's skepticism, and there's understandable skepticism. If for over 40 years you've had neoliberalism, which has said, let's just offshore production, if the working class and middle class have lost 25% of wealth since 1980, and you have President Biden come and you start building an industrial base and focused on the working class, and it's been a...
Do you feel that way? If you're watching this segment and you're working class or you're living in poverty, do you feel like Joe Biden's coming in to save you right now? Do you feel that way? I can tell you right now, most people I've spoken to don't feel that way. Joe Biden couldn't even give you the $2,000 stimulus checks. He had to cut that. We have a lot of money to send to Ukraine, though. How can you help working class people? How can you help poor people? You can start by giving everybody health care in this country. He doesn't even want to do that. What? If the Medicare for All bill comes across my desk, I would veto it. He doesn't even want to do that. Ro Khanna told me himself on this show that we are never going to get Medicare for All unless we have a president that actually supports it and wants to do it. He told me that himself.
Year and a half, that's not going to suddenly convince people, okay, the light bulb has gone off, our lives are going to improve. So to overcome 40 years of unchecked globalization is going to take some time, but we've got to tell.
That means it's not happening anytime soon. To overcome 40 years of this, Ro Khanna is telling you it's going to take some time. It's not happening this year. It's not happening next year. It's not. He's letting you know things are not going to change anytime soon. Even when you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, which really had nothing to do with inflation, we talked about that. When you looked at the provisions that were put in reference to healthcare, that's not even starting. That don't start till 2026. Where's the rush and the urgency to protect the American people the same way you can rush to protect people in Ukraine? Where's that sense of urgency? Some people may be dead by 2026. Are you kidding me?
People were working hard at it.
There's no reforming this. Do you guys see the problem? I've heard these same speeches over and over and over again. There's no reforming this. And I think more people are starting to realize that. This is the same stuff. They say just enough, right? Like they say just enough to get you to vote for them again. And then the next election cycle, they do the same thing. Let me say just enough to get them to vote for me again. And they keep promising the same thing. Next thing you know, they've been in office for 15, 20 years. Next thing you know, their kids are now joining them in the same office. What is happening? Don't you guys remember once upon a time, Nancy Pelosi agreed with universal health care? What happened to that? What happened? Same thing every time. We really have to wake up. We really do. And like with people like Ro Khanna, it's just, and I get it. He's a politician. This is part of his job, right? His job is not to speak poorly of Joe Biden, the current sitting president, which is a part of his party. It's his job to say the things that make people think that, yes, you have to go out and continue to support the Democratic Party. That's part of his job. But at some point, my question is, when does it get to the point, though, when you actively look the American people in the face and just be honest with them and just say, look, this isn't going to happen? How can you not feel some type of guilt for taking all this money from the people? That's why I tell you guys, don't donate your money to them. Don't donate money to the Democratic Party. Don't donate money to the Republican Party. Don't give them your money. How can you not feel some type of guilt taking all this money from people? And especially for those of you who donated to Bernie, and I met a lot of you, a lot of us really didn't have it to give in the first place. How do you take the people last $15, $10 and just lie? Tell them you're going to do something that you know you are not going to do. How could you? So when does it get to the point where you just say, look, these things are not going to happen, and here is the reason why? We keep playing the American people. The same people I see on Twitter, and some of the politicians as well, the squad members as well, the same people I see complain about the Democratic Party, complain about Joe Biden, are still doing the bidding of Joe Biden. They're still voting the way that Joe Biden wants them to vote. So what's the point? Malcolm X, MLK, Fred Hampton, they knew that this shit would not be accomplished through voting. You think that if Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, if they actually believed that voting actually did something for the American people, don't you think that's where they would have been? They knew it didn't. I think we need to look at some of the things that they've done. We need to look at some of the things the civil rights movement has done. We need to look back on some of these revolutionaries that brought change in different ways, through mutual aid, through direct action. And by the way, there was no internet back then. So what's the excuse today? Because it can't just be me. It can't just be Rome. It can't just be Nick. It can't be just JB. It can't be just CJ. Where's that same fire, that same passion? What happened to that? You know what happened? Rokana mentioned it at the beginning of that clip. Neoliberalism happened. And people embraced that and pushed aside the activism and the organizing. And that's why we are where we are today. Because people stopped. People stopped fighting. Do you think MLK just wanted to fight for a racial inequality? No, MLK had a whole plan. He was coming after economic issues as well. He was coming for reparations. He was asking for that. He was coming after the businesses about unionizing. He was starting to organize workers. He was talking about universal basic income. It wasn't just about, yes, everybody should be able to go to school together. It wasn't just about that. But the school system don't tell you that. Why is that? I've been in the education system. They don't tell you those parts about Martin Luther King. Why not? I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. That's right. Kill your egregios. Again, I don't know what that is, but he was anti-war. That's right. Colorado People's News says it's Sri Lanka time. You see how the people in Sri Lanka just rose up, kicked the prime minister out of his house and said, bye. They're not taking it. If you notice what's happening abroad, global south and in Europe, the people, they don't put up with this for too long. We've been putting up with it for decades. My whole life. And those of you who are older than me, hell, you'll probably tell me back in Vietnam, Sabby. It's been going on for a long time. Greg Bruce says FDR had some fascist policies and liberals need to stop name dropping him. That's true too, because let's be real. Some of FDR's policies did not include Black people. Robert said politicians have two well-honed skills, making vapid promises and kicking cans down roads. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. It is a form of disrespect when Democrats keep saying they're going to give you a loaf of bread, but end up giving you a slice or likely crumbs. Be mad, folks. It's a good point. I'll take that comment. I think there's one on Rockfin. Yeah. And then I'll get to this next story. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Bush Jr. was the last to raise the minimum wage. Matter of fact, I think he did it twice. Oh, yeah, that's right. You're right about that. Sorry. Also, if they're serious about bringing American-made manufacturing back, this is our opportunity to put in their face how worker cooperatives and co-ops in general would be perfectly fit for this task. Because when owners who are the workers come from the community, the plant is located in, they will never outsource. Yes, that's right, Roger. Well said. We're going to get into this story with breaking points because I've been noticing something. There seems to be this I guess I won't say anti-China. There seems to be a lot of fear mongering coming from breaking points about China. And It's worrisome. Now, I have a clip here that I'm going to play. By the way, the name of this video is called Why a Peaking China is Dangerous for the World. Now, this is the Realignment podcast. This is the show that Marshall Kosloff is a part of. He's also a part of Breaking Points. They're basically creating like a TYT style network thing. But some of these talking points I've been hearing, I kind of feel like I'm listening to mainstream media. And Sabby don't like it. So let's go ahead and get into this discussion. Listen to this.
Hey, Breaking Points. Check out this clip from my conversation with Michael Beckley about the relative strengths of the United States and China and how these strengths and weaknesses play into avoiding a conflict over the next decade. If you enjoy the episode and this clip, be sure to check our YouTube channel, or you can find the Realignment wherever you listen to your podcasts. Here's the clip.
You are really just pushing back against both of those frames, both like the US as a declining power and then China as the rising power. So can you start with the US first? Like, why should we interpret this coming decade through the perspective of America not being on the decline?
Well, I think if you look at sort of broad indicators of just which country has more wealth, which country has more military power projection capabilities, there's still a large gap between the United States and China. The US has roughly 3 to 4 times China's overall wealth. And in terms of just being able to deploy military forces around the world and fight wars far from your shores, you know, it's still stacked very heavily in America's favor. I do think that there are.
We're going to touch on this point right here. See, I'm not even 2 minutes in already. Let's go.
Through the perspective of America not being on the decline.
Well, I think if you look at sort of broad indicators of just which country has more wealth, which country has more military power projection capabilities, there's still a large gap between the United States and China. The US has roughly 3 to 4 times China's overall wealth. And in terms of just being able to deploy military forces around the world and fight wars far from your shores, you know, it's still stacked very heavily in America's favor.
It's still stacked very heavily in America's favor. To be able to deploy troops around the world. Why is this a pro? What's good about that? What's positive about that? What? Why is it considered? Why are we talking about this as though this is a positive thing for the United States government to have these bases all over the world? Why are we saying it this way? Where's the pushback? I hear none. Let's go back in.
I do think that there are local balances of power, though, where things have shifted in China's favor. So one is in the Taiwan Strait, where just because of the combination of geography and technology, China has home field advantage, essentially. It's only 100 miles from China. It's thousands of miles from the US. And the nature of precision-guided munitions just makes sitting ducks out of a lot of the very powerful capabilities that the United States has, like its aircraft carriers and those big bases. So even though the overall balance of power remains stacked very much in America's favor, and even though the long-term prospects of both countries for demographic reasons, for geographic and resource reasons, for alliance and diplomatic reasons, I think is even more stacked in America's favor, and the long-term trends are very favorable to the United States. There are these
stacked in America's favor. You see how they're talking about this? Pay attention to it.
Local balances of power where China has really translated a lot of its latent power into hard power assets on the ground, whether it's warships, sovereign loans around the developing world, in a very aggressive way. And so that's why, you know, in this second book, I became much more focused on, okay, what happens when you have a power that is peaking and is not going to catch up to its main rival? Do they mellow out and dial back their ambitions? And in this new book, you know, Hal and I go through all the historical cases where we've had a peaking power and they don't mellow out. They try to batter their way through the hard times. They try to score near-term victories that alter the long-term trends. And they try to basically grab whatever they can while they still can. And so that makes these local balances of power much more salient in this decade. So I think you can be.
He said they try to grab whatever power they can. Don't we do the same thing? Doesn't the United States government try to grab and hold on to whatever it can? Isn't that why the United States government for decades, and I actually showed a video on this one time going all the way back, the number of countries that the United States government has either intervened in or has stolen goods from? Isn't that something the United States government has been doing for decades? Are you kidding me? Oh, but I get it. I see. He only wants the US to be able to do that, not another country. Because the United States government wants to be the only one that's in power. They want to police the world. I don't think that's okay. I don't agree with that.
Be both confident about the long-term trends for the United States, but deeply worried about some of the short-term red lights that are flashing over, especially over something like Taiwan.
You know, I'm curious. So the good way to think of the peaking power framework is that, you know, these peaking powers take disastrous gambles. Japan, Pearl Harbor, we went over that. Various references to Germany at various points during its history.
Let's talk about disastrous gambles that the United States government has taken. I don't know. Afghanistan. Sanctions on the people in Afghanistan, starving people in Afghanistan. What about Somalia? What about the United States government has done to people in Africa? Hell, all the brown countries in the world. When we talk about gambles, come on. There's no other country that has done these atrocities that the United States government has done the way that the US has done it for decades. You've got to be kidding me. The way that they have intervened in countries abroad. And by the time the US government, they pull the troops out, the people there are worse off than they were before we showed up. Stealing resources. Let's talk about it. Why are you in Afghanistan? What was there? Opium, right? That's part of it. That's a big part of it. They'll tell you that we were there to help the women and the children. It was never about the women and the children, because if it was, you wouldn't have killed them. It's about resources. It's about money. It's about preventing any other country from rising up and gaining any type of power. It's about control. I can't believe this.
Has there been a case where the gamble is paid off?
So the big ones where you have a country that, you know, goes on like a Hitler style rampage, those basically never end well. But I think there's a selection factor going on there, namely that the countries that had to go on Imperial Japan or Hitler style rampages were in the kind of, from their perspective, most dire situations. And so they had to use force, and the deck was already stacked against them. One of our cases is actually the United States in the late 19th century, where after the Civil War, there was actually an economic boom in the United States. The U.S. economy takes off, is growing like gangbusters. But then in the 1880s and going into the 1890s, you have a series of depressions, and there was this perception that the U.S. had already expanded across the continent, and there were no more greenfield investment opportunities. We were running out of markets and resources, and that creates this push for what becomes the grand era of American imperialism abroad. The U.S. reacts by basically pumping exports and investment into Latin America and East Asia, and then building a huge military, especially a navy, to go protect those assets, and eventually ends up annexing territory way beyond its borders. And you could argue that in the U.S. case, it ultimately proved effective because the United States continued to grow, and that was one step towards becoming a major global power. I think the U.S.
That was one step into becoming a major global power. That's what it's all about. Wow.
This case, though, is not comparable to China today, because for one thing, the United States, it was just growing demographically. It had tons of resources that China doesn't have, and it was emerging in the Western Hemisphere where there weren't other great powers, right? I mean, like at least their homelands, all of their homelands are based in Eurasia. Eurasia is just a death trap for rising powers. I mean, any power that's tried to rise there and beat back its rivals usually gets crushed in a vice of all the other great powers ganging up on them, often with help from the United States. And that's what I think China is facing today. So they're not quite comparable, but if you're looking for a success case, I mean, the United States battered its way through those hard times in the 19th century and ends up emerging even more powerful and internationally engaged after its economic troubles in the 1880s and 1890s.
What do you think about America decline narratives? I think that there's, it's sort of, as a podcaster, I'm kind of a professional zeitgeist watcher. And I think what's annoying about this conversation is you'll see people just give this, look at all these problems, polarization, political violence, gas, all demographic, all these bits. And, you could say, well, I mean, look at the mid 1970s, post Watergate, Vietnam defeat, 58,000 American, troops dead. It seems like on most of those, a seemingly resurgent Soviet Union, it seems that at most of these decline, think of even like, Japan's going to overtake America in the 80s. It seems like most of these times we've hit just decline narratives. They've been, and I guess this gets to why I think your book is like really useful. Short term, it's easy to tell a story of American decline in the 70s and 80s. Long term, we were good to go. But now it seems the issue is it's the short term that actually matters the most with a possible conflict with China. So can you just reflect on that?
What conflict? I feel like, what is the conflict? What is happening right now? What is the conflict? Because last I checked, it seemed like we were poking them. They weren't poking us. I think people want these things to happen. I really do. I think there are people that they're just, a lot of them, some of them are warmongers. They're imperialists. They want to see the U.S. have conflict with someone. They want the U.S. to just take over the world and to be that global power that he was referring to earlier in the video. I really think some people really get off on that. Seriously. Forget about the people in those countries that had nothing to do with this. The civilians.
Yeah, I mean, I think, people that tout American decline in some ways are a source of strength for the United States in the sense that you highlight weaknesses in the system and that can generate support for reforms. I mean, that's a critical weakness, I think, of the Chinese system. When you have a dictatorship, you can't let the dictator look unknowing or unwise or admit to major mistakes or turn things around. You ban negative news, which is what China has done on the economic.
Hold up. No. Is he really talking about how China is banning negative news? What does the U.S. government ban? Seriously? Has he not been paying attention to all the people that have been censored in independent media? All the people who were kicked off of Spotify? All the people who lost their shows on RT? All the people who have been banned from PayPal and Venmo? How are you going to talk about another country preventing negative news? And our country right here, the United States government, is censoring actual journalists because they're telling both sides of the story. They're telling information that the U.S. Mainstream media is leaving out. How can you say that? This is unbelievable. I can't. Guys, make sure you hit that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. Let's go back. He's talking about China as if we don't do those same things here. If anything, for the people who are watching, for all the people who are trying to make you afraid of China, if anything, I think people should be afraid of us. People should be afraid of the U.S. government more than they should be afraid of China.
Sphere, and that makes smart reforms difficult. And so in the US case, I think you can walk a fine line and say, look, it's actually good that we are constantly airing our dirty laundry, that we are paying, that there's always an opposition party that is looking to essentially highlight all of the mistakes and all the terrible things that are going on under the watch of the other.
No, we don't. If that were the case, if we were always highlighting our dirty laundry, like he said, if that were the case, where are all the people? Where are the list of names of Epstein's clients? If we're airing our dirty laundry, where is that? Because yes, they got Ghislaine Maxwell, but where's the book of names? Since we air our dirty laundry, where's that? Thank you so much for that reminder, Hall Report. Same thing. Don't forget about Julian Assange. Come on, are we serious? Who is this guy? Hold on. Let me see. I'm sorry, guys. I forgot to tell you his name. Is his name mentioned here? Professor Michael Beckley. Oh my God. I can't, man. There's just some things I just can't.
Party, but I do worry that it is possible to cross that line from declinism to sort of nihilism and defeatism, such that you end up focusing more on your domestic political opponents and tearing each other apart rather than collaborating and coming together to actually fix a lot of these problems, which there always are going to be in the United States.
There's that word again, that nihilism, attacking your political opponents in the United States instead of coming together. And bro, you straight up out here throwing fear mongering about China. Are you kidding me? When he talk about come together and working together, getting things done, we've been talking about that on RBN, but that's not going to happen electorally. It is not. We try to tell everybody, vote third party, vote independent. But if you want immediate help right now, you need to do mutual aid. You need to do direct action. We need a mass movement in this country on the outside to put that pressure onto those politicians. Talk about working together. Most people in this space don't want to do it. Most people in this space don't want to leave their seat. They're too comfortable.
I actually worry very much that even though the United States has tremendous advantages, demographic, geographic, in terms of its alliance structure, its basing structure around the world, that it could still crumble from within. I mean, we've seen that historically too, where great empires fall prey to corruption and political division and even civil war.
What are you talking about? We already corrupt. We are already corrupt. Maybe it's time for it to happen. Maybe this time it's going to happen to us, to our country. You ever think about that? Because the U.S. government has intervened and they've gotten involved in Haiti. Haiti has crumbled. Syria, Afghanistan. Maybe it's time to go full circle, and maybe this time it's time for it to happen to the U.S. Did you ever think that? But he's talking like the United States has never been corrupt. Do you know the history of what has happened to people in this country? What's happened to people right now?
And in the United States today, I mean, levels of polarization are at their highest levels since the Civil War. And, I think this upcoming election is actually a very scary moment for the nation. I don't think it will necessarily collapse, but it just could be a much uglier period in American politics, and that could slow the U.S. ability to respond to major international events.
So for the last question, I realized we kind of buried the lead when it came to why is China actually a peaking power? Can you actually just outline for folks why long term, aside from this decade, and once again, we know this, internally, this is a concern within the Chinese Communist Party. Why do China's prospects actually look weaker longer term than we would conventionally think?
Why do you care? Why? What's with all the focus about what they're doing in their country? Who cares? I have an idea. What about we focus on what the United States government is doing economically to people in this country? We're so invested in what China's doing over there with their economy. What about the U.S. economy? What about the fact that the homeless population has been increasing over the past 2 years? What's that? I just showed you the video earlier about the rent spikes. Where's the desire to, where's that? So I think we need to focus on the economic issues that we have in our own country before we go and criticize economic issues in China. Because I had students who are from China. And you know what? Whenever they reach out to me, because most of them went back home after they graduated. Most of them didn't want to live here. Just wanted to come here for school. When we touch base, when we reconnect, you know what? They're living their best life. That's what they're doing.
I think the first point to note is that, double-digit growth rates and a steady rise is not the norm for any country, and especially not for China. Really, the past 40 years have been an anomaly. Most of Chinese modern history is a tale of strife and poverty. I mean, really, for 100 years, from 1839, from the First Opium War to the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949, China's...
He's talking about the history of China is a lot of strife and poverty. And the history of the United States? Like, what? The history of the United States? Strife and poverty? Slavery? Jim Crow? Ghettos? Immigrants living in ghettos? Black people living in ghettos? You want to talk about strife and poverty? Let's not pretend like these issues did not exist.
Just ripped apart by imperialist powers and has two of the worst civil wars in recorded history. The Taiping Rebellion alone kills 20 to 30 million people in the middle of the 19th century. And then even after the Chinese Communist Party unifies the nation.
And how many police have killed Black people in the United States? How many of that?
Kicks out the Japanese. China becomes the number one enemy of the United States almost immediately because of the Korean War, where they're fighting each other. And then 10 years later, China becomes the number one enemy of the Soviet Union because you have the Sino-Soviet split. And so it's not till the 1970s that China is not isolated and impoverished. And there are certain exceptional circumstances that made for China's subsequent exceptional rise. And we think that all four of those circumstances are going away quickly. I mean, one is just you have U.S. engagement and this period of hyper-globalization where the U.S. sort of fast-tracks China's entry in.
That's code word for imperialism, by the way. That globalization, that's code word for imperialism.
To Western markets so it can get access to those markets, access to Western technology and capital. And this is the start of what we now refer to as hyper-globalization. And lots of countries said, hey, we want to actually get in on China's economy. It's perfectly situated, huge population for labor and consumption. And so China's able to ride that wave of hyper-globalization to become the workshop of the world. A second sort of fleeting factor is the demographic dividend. So China in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s had anywhere between 10 to 15 workers for every retiree in its population. And that's because China had a big baby boom in the 1950s and 60s, then followed that up with a one-child policy. And so no population was more primed for productivity, I think, in human history than China was over the last 40 years. You had resource abundance. China was almost self-sufficient in most resources, which made growth very cheap because you had easy access to inputs. And then you had a Chinese government that was prioritizing economic growth and was willing to kind of get out of the way and let the Chinese people do their thing and have sort of quasi-private enterprises to engage with foreigners and set up export platforms. But lately, we've seen all four of these factors really reverse. Obviously, we're moving from a period of hyper-globalization to what some people are calling a new Cold War. I mean, the United States is waging a trade and tech war on China. Various other economies are following.
Notice he said the United States is waging that war. You heard that, right? The U.S. is waging the tech war on China, not the other way around.
China now faces thousands of new trade and investment barriers today that it didn't face as recently as 10 years ago. China's running out of resources. Half of its water and arable land, almost all of its deposits of energy are gone. And now it's the number one importer of food and energy and is suffering water scarcity. That's made growth 3 times more expensive. Every unit of GDP growth is 3 times more expensive to produce today than it was in the 2000s, just because inputs are so much more expensive and scarce. You have the end of that demographic dividend. Just between now and the early 2030s, China's going to lose 70 million working age adults and gain 120 million senior citizens. So that's like taking an entire France out of your workforce and adding an entire Japan of elderly retirees into your population. And then lastly, the Chinese government seems to be sliding back towards neo-totalitarianism. And that wouldn't be so bad if Xi Jinping was a savvy economic reformer, but he just shows time and again he is willing to sacrifice economic growth and efficiency in order to enhance its political control. The zero COVID lockdowns are just the latest manifestation of that. But, you know, you can look at the
Wait a minute. I'm sorry, but don't our politicians do the same thing? This part right here.
You have the end of that demographic dividend. Just between now and the early 2030s, China's going to lose 70 million working age adults and gain 120 million senior citizens. So that's like taking an entire France out of your workforce and adding an entire Japan of elderly retirees into your population. And then lastly, you know, the Chinese government seems to be sliding back towards neo-totalitarianism. And that wouldn't be so bad if Xi Jinping was a savvy economic reformer, but he just shows time and again he is willing to sacrifice economic growth and efficiency in order to enhance his political control. The zero COVID lockdowns are just the latest manifestation of that. But, you know, you can look at the regulatory crackdown on tech companies, the fact that subsidies are channeled to state-owned enterprises that are very...
Our government has crackdowns on tech companies too. It may not be exactly the same as China, but let's not pretend here the United States government. This is puzzling. Do people believe this shit? Like, this is really puzzling to me because I'm just like, look, I showed you the interview. What was that, last week with Joe Rogan and Mark Zuckerberg? Zuckerberg admitted that the FBI came to him and told him what not to put on Facebook. So why are we pretending like we don't have the same, or maybe not the same, but we don't have censorship? Our government isn't censoring us too. Why are we pretending this?
Inefficient, the outline of negative economic news, which obviously makes reform hard. So we just look at all of these headwinds. We show that they're actually going to get worse in the years ahead. And that's why we characterize China more as a peaking power rather than one that's going to continue to rise. It's really returning to the historical norm of encountering geopolitical hostility in a much more difficult growth environment.
Bro, and this isn't the first video where they've done like this China. Look at the title, you guys. Why a peaking China is dangerous. Notice that's in all caps for the world. Dangerous. You know, it's like, let me see. They have the comments on here. Let me see if they have them. Because when I saw the comments were not too good. Let's see. Oh, they still had, that's from a day ago. This one, casually discussing the extraction of wealth and resources from other nations for the sake of the US like it was a good thing. That comment has 94 likes. You guys see what I'm saying? You see the problem? So I had a poll question for you. And Eric, I'm going to have to take a quick break before the call-in segment. But I had a poll question for you because I've been noticing something about breaking points. It seems like they seem to be for imperialism. They don't, I don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, but are there any anti-war voices on breaking points? Like, I mean, a part of the actual lineup, not a guest. I mean, actually a part. Is there anyone on breaking points that is anti-war and pushing that rhetoric? Is there anyone on there pushing mutual aid rhetoric and pushing direct action rhetoric? Is there anyone on there who's anti-imperialist and is actually pushing that rhetoric? If not, why is that? Because to me, what I've seen from them, it's just almost like they're doing MSNBC News and CNN News and Fox News. They're doing their job for them, but on YouTube through an independent outlet. If they're still preaching these imperialist concepts and these imperialist ideas and advocating for this fear that people should have over China, guys, I didn't live through this stuff before. They did the same thing. I went through the deal with the Iraq War. There's so much fear, right? If they're doing that, then basically, then that would mean that they're being puppets for mainstream media only through an independent outlet. And all of the people that are left or progressive per se, who followed Crystal and Sagar because they came from Rising, which is where I actually first saw them on independent. Well, Rising's not independent, but on YouTube. It's like night and day. It's weird. They're independent now, but I feel like I hear more mainstream media talking points from them now than I did when they were on Rising. And Rising is not independent. Rising is corporate. I don't know. Go look at the comments of this video. Go look in the comments because I had to stop scrolling. I don't know. But the poll question was, oopsie. Uh-oh. Oh, thanks, Eric. I was like, I don't know what I did. The poll question was, does Breaking Point support imperialism? And this is guys, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to attack. This is a genuine question. Now, this is 450 votes. 72% of you said yes. 8% said no. 21% said not sure. Hey, it moved. I don't know why it moved. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So honestly, I really don't, the messages that has been coming from them is concerning. Someone mentioned something just a second ago. Seriously, maybe I missed the comment. Is anybody on there anti-war and is actually expressing that they're anti-war? And I don't mean that you're anti-war except for this. I mean, anti-war, anti-imperialist. Is anyone on there that is that? Because I don't hear the pushback. Where was the pushback? There's no what? I don't know, dude. I don't know. Well, no, I haven't seen anyone say anything yet in the chat. So that's the results of the poll. But look, it's concerning. It's concerning. Yeah, Kitty Films, where's the push? Where's the pushback? This ain't the first time there's been someone that came on there to talk about China. There was another person that came on to talk about China, and the comments in that section were bad too. Because people are like, why the fuck you not push back on this dude with these talking points? Bizarro Joe Marshall is a host from The Realignment, and it's pretty damn conservative. It's funny. It's just like, so it's okay for there to be conservatives on Breaking Points, but it's not okay for there to be conservatives on the Jimmy Dore show. Make that make sense. You guys see the problem? I just, no. Eric, you want to come do the chats? I'm gonna have to change the time on the call-in because I did realize that I went over my time. But those talking points are cringe, man. But I would have to do.
You went over your time again?
I did. You'd have to do the super chats there, but I'll be back. Bye.
Alrighty. All right. How's everybody doing on this almost Friday, Thursday night? Which Sabby's going to have her call-in show coming on soon. Here, we'll put on our call-in starting soon banner just to make it official. There we go. Let's see. Yeah, we got lots of comments in here. And then when Sabby comes back, then we'll be jumping over to call-in where you can either hit the link. We'll be giving you the link. Here, let me post the link. Let me do that now. Let's get that link posted into the chat. And you'll be able to either hit the link and get, there we go, there's the call-in link. You'll be able to hit the link and get it on your computer, or you can do the call-in app on your phone. All right, let's see what we got here for all these built-up chats. This from Delthea. Breaking Point is where I go to see what the MSM is talking about because they are in the MSM. Yeah, I know. we thought breaking points was going to be something different way back when, I think, or at least a lot of us did. From Cake Batter, the U.S. always projects its crimes onto its adversaries. True that. From Bad Cookies, what are we going to do to China? We need them more than they need us. And yeah, I think this is a good point there, Mr. Bad Cookies or Ms. Bad Cookies, whichever it is. They make all our stuff, so it's kind of hard to just say we're gonna cut off everything from China and go to war. This super chat from AJF. Thanks for this. We got to accept that we have deliberate, pervasive indoctrination of nationalist grandioseness, left to right. I'll list the framing terms next. And then, thanks for that, AJF. And thanks for this from Frank Johnson. He writes coloring books, huh? We also had come up new member JM. Glad to have you on board there. Thanks, JM. And then from Lawrence Johnson, the bloodthirsty warmongering ghouls are pushing us into a military confrontation with Russia and China. This will not end well. Yeah, and of course, how it always seems to end is with the billionaires and the MIC, the defense contractors, all the arms dealers, I should say, all making bank, and the rest of us sliding down more and more. Thanks for this super chat from Takwish. Willie D said it best. We are living in the heart of the capitalist empire. We have a broken political system with two parties that support forever wars. That sure is what's happening. Thanks for that. And thanks for this one from super chat from China is the future. Anyone acting like Hitler is the U.S., not China. And thanks for this from AJF Milan. Historically manifest destiny, city on the hill, indispensable nation, project for a new American century, and the most in-your-face one, America is the greatest country in the world. And I think he's talking about, America's sloganeering and propaganda about itself. Thanks for that, AJF. And this one from Frank Johnson, thanks. He really said that China bans people, really? That was, how do we call that, projection, or just what they got to see. This other super chat from China is the future. Thank you. China never once declared themselves as free speech absolutists like the U.S. champions themselves as. Thanks for that. Thanks for this one from AJF. The one that's most annoying is American exceptionalism. The conflict is our elite's ego is threatened by another nation, surpassing our blind hubris. Thanks for that, AJF. Oh, and coming in again, the AJF. USA is so great that we can't modernize and maintain drinking water systems, railways, power grids for our cities, LOL. Yeah, I mean, that was one thing I was noticing, was that during the when they were talking about China and all China's supposed problems, China doesn't seem to have a major city right now that can't provide clean drinking water the way we do. Louis Anthas asked, that was Breaking Points, and that was the Realignment podcast, which is part of the Breaking Points network. And thanks for this super chat from Gala. You can take the girl out of MSNBC, but you can't take MSNBC out of the girl. Hashtag crystal ball. And thanks for this from Rodrigo. Rising brings on gray zone. BP Breaking Point smears gray zone. And thanks for that. And this one from Timothy McDermott. I do think Crystal is anti-war, but she has a tendency to ignore a lot of solid information in regards to the Ukraine war. She's starting to come around, but how did she not see this off the rip? And thanks for that one, Timothy. Let's see. Let's take a peek here, see if I've missed any in the meantime. All right, and I know we got a little something more on the rock fins from Mr. Rogers. Let's check Mr. Roger Meadows, not Mr. Rogers. Let's see, let me bring that one up here from Roger Meadows. With what military guys? I don't think these two chuckleheads understand that enlistments are down. Let's ask Marshall if he believes in free college. Yeah, they certainly seem to love war and love the military, and I don't think either of those two dudes are quite ready to sign up. So let's see, what else was I thinking about during all this? Yeah, I mean, I feel like what you're seeing with those guys is the kind of discussion you get when you start from the assumption that that China's bad and China's the big evil, and if you just determine to make that what you see and what you think, that's the kind of conversation you get from those two clowns. And I love this peaking power. It's like, are you a child? I mean, it's a peaking power. They're just peaking out. I mean, it's
just like, weird.
Okay, this is a professor. Hello.
So that call-in link is pinned to the top of the chat, guys.
There you go.
I will start that room in just a second. So we get through all the chats.
We did. There were a lot of them. I just finished.
Man, I don't know what to say. Like, listen, I'm not for war. I'm not for imperialism. I think the United States government has destroyed a lot of these countries. And then people want to complain, and people say, why are they coming here? Why are all these people coming here? Because we destroyed their countries.
War's so profitable.
Exactly. It's a hot mess. It is a hot mess. Okay, hit that like button if you didn't have a chance to do so. I'm gonna go ahead and get this call-in room opened up. And you guys, you know how we do this. I will be here tomorrow night. I'm going to Camp Dada Saturday morning, not tomorrow morning. So I'll be here tomorrow night, you guys, and I'll be heading over to New York to do the direct action events with, I think it's about 40 other activists. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, Sabby Sabs, how do I become a member? There should be an option on my channel to hit join. Like join and become a member. There should be that option. Or I also have Patreon, and those links are at the bottom of the videos. So you can see those as well. But yeah, I can't, man. I can't make up. I don't know where this is coming from, but we already have mainstream media. We don't need more mainstream media. Okay, guys, that's it for tonight. You know how we do this. Join me over on Call In. Links pinned to the top of the chat. Have a good night. And let me go ahead and press this because get this going. Whee! All right, the room is open. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.